Hi, Nina. It's great to have you with me today. It's been a while, and I know we connected through a entrepreneurs group, and I'm excited to have you here with me today because you shared with me some information about your journey in life and what you're doing and how you're helping other people. So we'll dive into that, but let me just start off with you just sharing with us and the listeners, um, what are you doing today? Who are you?
Who am I? What a question. Well, professionally, I am a psychoanalyst, and as such, I specialize in eating disorders, especially binge eating disorder, the most prevalent eating disorder that no one knows they have because they think they have food addiction or, you know, no willpower or whatever. So, in that capacity, I see clients, I see patients, I see people all over the world in coaching programs. I write books. I have my own podcast, The Binge Cure with Dr. Nina. And I'm all about helping people realize, hey, it's not what you are eating that is the problem. It is what's eating at you. And so I encourage them to be a detective of their minds along with me so we can discover the clue to why they're doing something they don't want to do or, you know, like eating or not doing something they want to do, like go to the gym. And it's really rewarding to help people change their relationship with themselves. So that's what I do. As far as who I am, I don't know, kind of a smart, crazy, zany, but don't tell anyone, um, creative, uh, dork, I would say. Yeah, I think that's my secret. I think I'm kind of a secret dork. And I'm a girl mom. I have two beautiful daughters and a Great Dane mom and happily married woman to my wonderful husband, David. Um, just living my life.
It's awesome. That's great. Yeah, that's what it's all about, right? Enjoying yourself along the way. Yeah.
Live, do not merely exist. Like we're
Yeah, I like that. Um, so you help people with eating, right? And so, I mean, did this just come out of nowhere one day, or I mean, I know a little bit about what happened for you, but can you just share us how you got to doing this?
okay. So, uh, let me take you to when I was a brand new therapist. And I was doing my first group for women with binge eating disorder. So, brand new therapist, not even licensed. I'm like a trainee or intern or whatever I was. And I walk into this group, and there are the women in the group, and they're all, you know, older and super scary. And one of them, she's like in her 50s with bright red hair and big jewelry. I bet you can picture her in your mind. She looks me up and down and she says, so, what does a skinny bitch like you know about binge eating? Well, what she didn't know was I was once the poster child, or considered myself the poster child for eating disorders. But what I said was, this skinny bitch once scarfed down an entire box of gingerbread cookies, and I hate gingerbread, totally hate it, but I could not stop eating those cookies. And I told the group my story, which is that when I was 5 years old, I seemingly randomly looked down at my legs and thought they were too big. I was a perfectly normal weight child. I'll get to why this was, seemingly random, but not really later. Um, and that began my descent into eating disorder hell when I became the poster child for eating disorders because I was always on some crazy restrictive diet, and eventually my willpower would fail and I would like eat everything in sight, and sometimes I would purge. So I had all the eating disorders. And if you look in my journals from that time, everything was numbers. Calories I ate, calories I burned, the weight I was going to be one day when I would have a great life, all the things. So it was miserable. I mean, it was horrendous. And finally in college I went to therapy, but I went for anxiety. I talked about guys and goals and dreams and my parents and, all the things, but I never talked about food, not once, because I was actually quite mortified. And I was so humiliated by what I was doing that nobody knew the truth. My therapist had no idea that she was, in fact, treating the poster child for eating disorders. But by the time I left therapy, without ever talking about food, all my eating disorders were gone. All my behaviors were gone. Gone, gone, gone. And not once had I ever discussed food. And when I share the story, people look at me like, what? Wait, what do you mean? How do you get over all eating disorders without ever talking about food? And my answer is, well, because food was actually not the problem. It was the solution to the problem, whether I was starving myself or binging and purging. It was a solution to the real problem. A bad solution was a way of coping with the real problem, which was my perfectionism, my harsh relationship with myself. So I was constantly a taskmaster. Nothing was ever good enough. And eventually I would, turn to food to escape or not think about that. I'm oversimplifying, but basically it was a way of coping. It wasn't the problem. And why, by the way, did I, at age 5, suddenly decide that I was too big when I was not? So my parents are college professors, and they were serious academic people, still are. And what did my mom do during COVID? She read like the top 100 classic books of all time again. All right, you get the picture. So I'm 5, and I'm in this academic family, and I'm always being told, you're too loud, you're too sensitive, you're too dramatic, you need to calm down. You're just like, you're too much, was the message. And my 5-year-old mind, because 5-year-olds are very concrete, 5-year-old mind went, oh, I'm too much. There must be too much of me. Maybe if I were smaller, I would somehow be better and more lovable and they'd accept me. So these 2 experiences are what caused me to want to become a therapist, because I saw the psychology behind it, right? It wasn't about food. And I wanted to become a therapist and later became a psychoanalyst because I wanted to help people stop the madness and the obsession around eating disorders. But also, if I may, the real problem is not what we're eating. The real problem is our societal prohibition against emotions, because people don't know how to handle their emotions. So that's why they end up using food and other things to cope. So that's the story.
That's the story. All right. And that's a lot. So I mean, binge eating, is it more, it's mixed in with depression and everything else, it sounds like.
It's different for every person. People used to say to me, like, well, what's it like to treat eating disorders? And I'd say, well, I have no idea, because I don't treat eating disorders. I treat people, and people develop eating disorders for reasons that are as unique as they are. So first of all, let me just say what binge eating is and isn't, because a lot of people will be like, oh my God, I binged, I ate 4 cookies. That's not a binge, people. That is not a binge. That's 4 freaking cookies. Other people will say, I ate 40 cookies, and that was me just getting started. Yes, that's a binge. So binge eating is when you eat a huge amount of food, often in a very short amount of time, and you feel terrible, not just about what you did, but about who you are. So binge eating is also followed by a lot of self-recrimination and self-hatred and just self-attack, and you just feel terrible about yourself. Emotional eating, binge eating is a form of emotional eating. All binge eating is emotional eating, but not all emotional eating is binge eating. So emotional eating is when you're eating you might not be eating 40 cookies, but you're eating to like resolve something emotional, or you're eating to change the way you feel. And it could be as like, Chandler and Friends eating the ice cream. That's the obvious. But there's also people who maybe feel lonely, and that makes you feel like a void internally. And you might eat unconsciously. You're not conscious of. You might eat to fill the void, or to comfort yourself, or to distract yourself, or some people are like, wait, I've got to be a food addict because I ate so much that my stomach hurt. Like, what kind of crazy person eats until their stomach hurts and they keep eating? I'm like, well, no crazy person. Maybe you're unconsciously converting emotional pain to physical pain, because physical pain is easier to get rid of than emotional pain. So it really is motivated by something internal, but most people think the problem is food. No.
Yeah, I can see that. And so like this group is just a bunch of people sharing, why they're binging. Is that
What group?
the group that you went to when you were first
Oh,
work?
when I was a therapist. So yeah, when I was a therapist. So I was leading the group, and the group was it was actually like maybe 5 women, most of whom were in their 40s and 50s at the time. They were all kind of scary to me. I was brand new. And what I did with them, and what I do with my current patients in California or clients worldwide, is I really help them look at the reasons why. So we don't focus on what you're eating, we're focusing on why. And that's why I say, like, I'm the detective, right? Let's figure out the why. It's not about willpower, it's about why power. And I'll give you an example of this woman who came to me, and she's like, hey, Dr. Nina, maybe some of your other people, maybe they like have emotional problems and they're eating emotionally. She tells me she is a food addict and she can prove it. So I said, okay, no, she knows I don't believe in food addiction, even though I co-edited a book called Beyond the Primal Addiction. The premise of the book was all addictions are ways of coping. Anyway, I digress. So I said, oh, you can prove it. Well, I'm all ears. Please tell me. So she tells me that the night before, she was watching TV, Netflix and chilling. Nothing was going on, nothing emotional, nothing was bothering her. And all of a sudden, as she put it, Ben and Jerry's is calling her name. She's like, calling my name. I'm addicted to Chunky Monkey. Like, okay, well, what were you watching before Ben and Jerry started calling your name? She's like, my favorite show, Charmed. I love Charmed. So since she was doing something she enjoyed, there was no reason, or so she thought, that she'd want to down a pint of ice cream and go from there. So, okay, what was the episode about? Well, it's when this demon comes down, they break the bond between the sisters, they start fighting, it gets really nasty and contentious. And I said, knowing she has a difficult relationship with her sister, I say, oh, sisters fighting, huh? And that's when she gave me that, Home Alone, hands on the face. Oh my gosh. Because what had happened was watching the show activated her own sister stuff. But before she was consciously aware that she was being triggered, she went to ice cream for comfort and distraction. Ice cream was not the problem. It was the solution to the real problem, which is her difficulty dealing with her feelings towards her very difficult sister. And so if we'd been like, well, next time ice cream calls your name, brush your teeth, take the dog for a walk, take a bubble bath, write in your journal, nothing would have happened, because she had to get to the true trigger. We're not triggered by food. We're triggered by some situation that food takes us away from often. And so what I do is I help people identify what that is and what's really eating at them, so that they can directly deal with that. It's kind of like a weed and a root. A weed is, if you just pluck the weed, it's going to grow back, right? You don't need to be a gardener to know that there's a root underground and it's growing the weed. Same with our psyche. Like if you just focus on food, it's plucking weeds. If you go on a diet, you're just plucking weeds. You got to get to that root, which I love this analogy because we can't see the roots hidden from us, just as there are hidden parts of ourselves in our unconscious that we need to root out. And so once we dealt with her sister stuff, guess what? Ice cream stopped calling her name. How about that?
So did she stop watching the show too?
No.
No, but she realized what triggered her and go, okay, I'm not having it now because this is triggering me to go have ice cream.
She didn't even know she was triggered. Because we go so fast to ice cream or whatever that we don't even know that something is activating us sometimes. Sometimes it's really obvious, like, the bad breakup. There's even an ice cream called bad breakup ice cream. Sometimes it's really obvious, like, oh, this happened. I'm feeling terrible. I want to eat to comfort myself. Sometimes it's totally obvious, but sometimes it's not. And so in that group and with my individual and group clients and patients, that's what I help them do, is figure out what is their secret why, what's hidden from them, and actually once you're aware of it, then how do you process that? How do you deal with, once you realize what the root is, how do you deal with it? Because you can't drop your feelings or your thoughts. You can't positive think them away. You can't ignore them. And you certainly cannot stuff them down. So I help them like deal with those feelings, emotions, conflicts, whatever, so that when you process that, you're done. You don't need anything to distract you.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say, like, food could be like a safe coping mechanism kind of deal here, right? Instead of going towards alcohol and drugs, would that?
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It is a coping strategy. It's just a negative coping strategy.
But we don't think that because it's food. Is that right?
We don't think that. We think it's about food, right? We think the problem is food. But, the same is true of all addictions. The problem is some difficulty in dealing with things. When even drugs and alcohol, when you find a new way of coping with what's going on with you, you will not be as likely to turn to those substances.
I agree with you. Yeah. So you doing what you're doing is awesome, because what a lot of people need to realize is it takes somebody on the outside to kind of look in, to have you look in, and you asking those questions that other people would never be asking themselves is what helps them out a lot. Yeah. That was a great example. And that woman was able to continue to watch her show that I guess she truly loved and not have to worry about eating the ice cream. So, and then you mentioned, she would stop eating ice cream or whatever. And you mentioned maybe like journaling and bubble bath and all that stuff. So, what's all that?
Well, all that is all the BSE advice that people are being given, even in eating disorder treatment centers. And I call total BS on that because it doesn't help for obvious reasons. It's just another distraction. Like, so people are constantly being told, literally being told, if you want to binge, go brush your teeth. If you want to binge, go take a bubble bath. These are just distractions. And as one person said to me, hey, if brushing my teeth worked as well as binge eating, I would have the widest smile in America, right? It doesn't work. That's a distraction. And what you need to do is figure out what's really bothering you and find a new way of coping, processing, dealing with it. And a lot of times we're told in our culture, don't have feelings, right? So that's why it's so hard. Don't have feelings. If you're a guy, God forbid, you should be vulnerable or be sad. Boys don't cry. And if you're a woman, oh no, they never cry. No, no, no. And if you're a woman, it's not nice to be angry. Like you're an angry person. Go to anger management class. No, we all have feelings which are just responses to situations. And we're being taught that they're character flaws, but they're not. They're what connects us to ourselves and to each other. And if we don't find new ways of coping, of processing what we feel, we're going to use something to distract ourselves. And believe me, that something is going to be food, not a toothbrush or a bubble bath. Or, even if you journal, you'd be journaling about the wrong thing. You'd be journaling about like, oh, ice cream called my name. If you don't know why ice cream called your name, how you were being distracted, then journaling is not going to do you any good. So, there are only two ways of dealing with things that come up. One is to distract from it. The other is to actually work through it. Identifying what you feel, expressing what you feel, and then like reassuring yourself, responding to yourself. And we're not taught any of that which is why there are so many problems with various forms of negative coping strategies in our culture.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So what would you say uh maybe bring somebody to you for your assistance to help them? You know, what let me see if I can find a better way to
Yeah,
yes, you got it.
I get it. Yeah, I got it. Yeah. Well, I treat women and men, and often they're in their 40s, 50s, even older. And they come to me and they tell me, hey, they've been struggling with this for decades. They have tried every diet there is, every workout program, everything. It has never worked in the long run. They know there's something else that maybe they need to do, but they don't know what else to do besides dieting because they truly think the problem is food. And often they've read my book or they've heard me on a podcast or something like that, and they're desperate and they know there's something else out there other than dieting, but they don't know what that is and they need guidance. And so they come to me and say, help. And then they usually say, I've been struggling with this for decades. You're going to help me in, 12 weeks in your program? And I say, yes, because for all those decades, you have been focused on the wrong thing. You've just been pulling weeds, pulling weeds, pulling weeds, pulling weeds. We're going to get to the root. We're going to do some emotional gardening, get to the root, and then you know what? You're done. And that's why I believe in liberation, not recovery, because recovery is, oh, every day I'm going to wake up and think I'm going to be good today with food and eat mindfully and yuck. No, I want people to wake up and think about their day, not their diet. And liberation is when you used to do the thing, you don't do it anymore. You went through the process of healing, identifying what's going on with you, learning to express yourself, healing the past, learning how to be, thinking about your future, all the things. And now you don't use food to cope anymore, and you can actually enjoy it a lot more. And there's no good food, bad food, which, good me, bad me. All of that's done. You just live your life. That's what I believe in, and that's what I love helping people to achieve.
Yeah, and only 12 weeks, right?
12 weeks, yes. Sometimes more, but 12 weeks radically changes people. By the way, that same group,
Yeah.
that same initial group where they said, what is a skinny, that one woman said, what is a skinny bitch like you? So we're talking about all of these things, right? And there was this one woman in the group, and she kept saying, no, you know what? I really think I just like food too much. And if I could just lose these 20 pounds, then I'd be happy. Which partly is diet mentality, because diet mentality does a number on us. The $60 billion diet industry that says, if you just lose weight, you're going to have a great life. You're going to be the best version of you. You're going to be happy. Evil liars. Anyway, so she kept saying, I just like food too much, and that's why I can't lose this 20 pounds and keep it off. Oh, she lost that 20 pounds. She just kept regaining it. So the last day of the group, like 20 minutes before the last day of the group, she says this. She says, I think maybe if I were not thinking about these 20 pounds, maybe I'd want to lose my husband. Maybe I'd want a divorce. So you can see that staying focused on her weight, on food, all the things, having all that food noise in her head distracted her from thinking about things she did not want to think about, like she was not happy in her marriage. So there's always a reason. And that's why, as a detective of the mind, it's really cool to look for clues and figure it out, solve the mystery.
Do your clients find it kind of fun too after they figure it all out on the other end?
Yeah, they become interested in their inner world instead of just on what they're doing, and instead of being miserable and beating themselves up and feeling bad. And often they're very successful in other areas of their lives. I mean, super successful, and they'll often be, why am I so successful in my career, but I can't get this resolved? And usually it's because they just have a horrible relationship with themselves. They're harsh to themselves, they're critical, they're judgmental, they're impatient. They don't know how to be with themselves in a nurturing, helpful way. And so much of what we do is really change our relationship to ourselves, change their relationship to themselves. And that's what changes everything. How to do that, that's the tricky part. But that's making peace with yourself and changing your relationship with yourself changes your relationship with food.
Do you find that a lot of the times it goes way back to their childhood? Yeah.
Absolutely. Either way back to their childhood or later, call it at, college, early adulthood. I have never encountered anyone who is 40 years old and said, oh, I never struggled with this until like 5 years ago. Unless they had other eating disorders, because often people, maybe they go from anorexia to bulimia to binge eating, similar to what I did. And they might end up at binge eating, but have a history of other eating disorders.
Okay. Did the clients, going back to childhood or whatever, I know you're investigating this stuff, so I'm sure you're digging deep and asking a lot of questions. But I'm sure in the beginning, like a lot of people, they might be like, "Oh, I don't remember that far back," and then they have to kind of drift back in
Well,
time.
but like they'll say something like, for example,
Mhm.
um, a lot of them will say, I don't want to talk about the past. I talked about the past with my other therapist for, 10 to 20 years and it never helped. And I'll say, of course it didn't, because you can't talk about the past as if it only happened in the past. You have to look at the past as how it is haunting your present. Like, what from the past is affecting you in the present? So how we get to that is, for example, someone who has a difficult relationship with their boss. Their boss is super critical. Nothing's ever good enough. They feel terrible about themselves. Well, I know as a psychoanalyst that our relationships at the workplace have their roots in our family. So bosses are like resonate as parents to us unconsciously. No one is consciously going like, oh, my boss is resonating as my father or my mother. Like, but they are. It's what's hidden. That's the roots. And our coworkers can feel like siblings. So if someone comes in and says, oh, my boss is so critical and I'm always thinking about it and I just can't let it go and I don't know what's wrong with me, I'll say, well, when is the first time you remember feeling this feeling that you're having now? Think back. What comes to mind? And they'll usually go, oh, well, yeah. I mean, I remember once, and they'll say, I haven't thought about that for years. When you ask the right questions, people remember things. No. Or what is familiar about this that you're going through? Oh, well, it kind of reminds me of this. And that's how we see the bridge from the past to the present.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great example. So I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, because I kind of look at myself like I don't know if I could go that far back, right? Like trying to figure out if there's anything wrong with whatever it is, right? So yeah, so I'm glad you shared that. Nina, how does somebody connect with you and learn more? I don't know, maybe you have something that you can just share free. I don't know what you have out there to dive into why binge eating, you know?
Well, you can go to my website, Dr. Nina Inc., DrNinaInc.com, drninainc.com, and you can find, I have a very extensive blog. You can get my Binge Buster roadmap. You can also connect through my website. You can go to my binge eating, the binge eating cure on YouTube, which I have tons and tons of videos. You can watch those for free. You can read my book, The Binge Cure, 7 Steps to Outsmart Emotional Eating, the companion workbook, The Binge Cure Journal. You can find me on all social media, TikTok at The Binge Cure, Instagram at Dr. Nina Psychoanalyst. I think I'm everywhere. Could have said you just if you just do like a Dr. Nina, the binge cure search, you will find me in many, many places. And I also I answer all my email myself. So if you email me through my website or in some form, I will always answer myself because I really like to talk to people and give them hope.
That's great. Yeah, being personal. That's awesome. So I have a question for you. What are three key things you've learned and used along your journey?
Um, Trust yourself. When I first started, by the way, just briefly, I was so I was like, I'm going to do a website and I'm only going to treat people with eating disorders. This is 23 years ago. 23, God, oh my God, 23 years ago. 23 years ago, very few therapists had websites. Can you believe it? Isn't that crazy? And I was like, I'm going to specialize in eating disorders. That's all I'm only treating people with eating disorders. And I'm going to share my own story on my website. And everyone was like, you can't do that. You can't have a website. And you certainly can't specialize in eating disorders. Like, no one will come. I'm like, everyone with eating disorders will come to me. So, like, I learned trust yourself and uh, uh, trust yourself in every area. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You can't do it alone. And also make sure that you balance all the work that you do, because I do a lot. Like I see people, I write books, I do my blog, I do my show, I do like I all the time. I'm busy. I learned the hard way. You gotta have balance. So make sure that you have balance in your life and that you're not just work, 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 work all the time. Really think about what fulfills you, so to speak, what brings you joy, and embrace that, because life is not just about being productive. It's about living, you know? And I think that I love to think about like do good and do well. You could do both. You have to do both. You have to do well and thrive, and you have to do good and help other people.
That's what
That is my wisdom.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's great wisdom, right? And it took you a while to get to that point. So I mean, you wanted to start out with helping people and therapy and everything, and I mean, look how far you progressed. You got a website. This is awesome. I'm glad you came on. I'm glad you shared your journey, and I'm glad that you are helping people with binge eating and whatever else that you might be able to help them with when you have them as clients. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and letting me share my story and offer hope.
Sure, absolutely. You're welcome.